The winter wind howled through the cracks in the wooden cabin, carrying with it the scent of pine and approaching snow. Sarah Matthews pressed her trembling hand against the bruise on her cheek, wincing at the pain. Her reflection in the cracked mirror showed a woman she barely recognized anymore. The bright-eyed girl who had married Thomas Matthews 3 years ago had vanished, replaced by someone hollow and afraid. Thomas would be home soon from the trading post, and she knew what that meant. He always drank when he went to town, and alcohol turned him into a monster. The man she had married in Boston had seemed charming and ambitious, promising her adventure in the Western Territories. What he had delivered instead was isolation and violence. She moved quietly through the cabin, setting out his dinner with practiced precision. Every plate had to be in the right place. Every fork had to be perfectly aligned. Any mistake would give him an excuse, though he rarely needed one. Sarah had learned that perfection was her only shield, though it was a weak one at best. The sound of hooves outside made her heart race. She smoothed her dress and took a deep breath, forcing her face into a neutral expression. The door burst open, and Thomas stumbled inside, reeking of whiskey. His eyes were already bloodshot, his jaw clenched in that way she had come to dread. "What are you staring at?" he snarled, throwing his hat across the room. "Get me my dinner, woman." Sarah hurried to serve him, her hands shaking as she ladled stew into his bowl. She had made it exactly how he liked it, with extra salt and thick chunks of venison. Perhaps tonight would be different. Perhaps he would eat and fall asleep without incident. But hope was a dangerous thing in this cabin. Thomas took one bite and spat it across the table. "This is garbage. Are you trying to poison me?" "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered, though she knew the stew was perfect. "I'll make something else." His chair scraped against the floor as he stood. "Sorry? You're always sorry, but nothing ever changes." His hand shot out faster than she could dodge, catching her shoulder and spinning her around. "Maybe you need another lesson in being a proper wife." The beating that followed was worse than usual. When it was finally over, Sarah lay on the floor, tasting blood in her mouth. Thomas had passed out at the table, snoring loudly. She knew she had to leave. Tonight. If she stayed, he would eventually kill her. Moving slowly, painfully, Sarah gathered a few supplies. She took only what she could carry: a blanket, some dried meat, her mother's locket, and the small knife from the kitchen. The money Thomas kept hidden in the flour tin would help her survive. She took it without guilt. She had earned it with every bruise, every broken promise, every night of terror. The night was freezing as she slipped out of the cabin. Snow had begun to fall, covering her tracks almost as quickly as she made them. She had no clear plan, only a desperate need to get as far from Thomas Matthews as possible. The nearest town was 2 days' walk, but she couldn't go there. Thomas would look for her in obvious places. Instead, Sarah headed toward the mountains, where she had heard the Lakota people had their winter camps. Thomas always spoke of them with contempt and fear, which meant they might be her best chance at refuge. White settlers avoided their territory, and Thomas was too much of a coward to follow her into lands he didn't control. The snow fell harder as she walked through the darkness, each step taking her farther from her old life. Her body ached, and the cold bit through her thin coat, but Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in years, a tiny spark of hope. She might die out here in the wilderness, but at least it would be on her own terms. At least she would die free. As dawn broke over the mountains, Sarah collapsed beneath a pine tree, exhausted and shivering. She pulled the blanket around herself and closed her eyes, not knowing if she would wake again. But she had made her choice, and there was no going back now. The voices came to Sarah through a fog of cold and pain. She couldn't understand the words, but the tone was urgent, concerned. Strong hands lifted her, and she tried to struggle, panic flooding through her semi-conscious mind. Was it Thomas? Had he found her already? "Easy, easy," a voice said in accented English. "You are safe." Sarah's eyes fluttered open to see faces looking down at her, Lakota faces, with dark eyes filled with curiosity and compassion. She was being carried on a travois, wrapped in warm furs that smelled of sage and smoke. The morning sun was higher now, and she realized she had been unconscious for hours. The group brought her to a winter camp nestled in a protected valley. Teepees stood in organized circles, smoke rising from their peaks into the clear blue sky. People emerged to watch as the hunting party returned with their unexpected find. Sarah saw women whispering to each other, children peeking out from behind their mothers' skirts, and men regarding her with cautious interest. She was taken to a teepee where an elderly woman waited. The woman's face was lined with age, but her eyes were sharp and knowing. She began examining Sarah's injuries, making soft clicking sounds of disapproval as she uncovered each bruise and cut. Sarah flinched at first, expecting pain, but the old woman's touch was gentle. "My name is Winona," the woman said in careful English. "I am healer. You are hurt bad. Who did this?" Sarah's throat tightened. "My husband." Winona nodded as if this explained everything. "You run from him. Good. Bad man." She began applying poultices to Sarah's wounds, speaking softly in Lakota to the younger women who assisted her. The medicines smelled strange but soothing, and Sarah felt her body beginning to relax for the first time in days. Over the next few days, Sarah learned about her rescuers. The camp belonged to a band led by Chief Lakota, whose name meant friend to everyone. She rarely saw him, but she heard the respect in people's voices when they spoke of him. The women who cared for her were kind, teaching her simple words in Lakota and sharing their food without expecting anything in return. Sarah discovered that Winona was the chief's grandmother. The old woman had lost her own daughter to violence years ago and seemed to recognize something familiar in Sarah's haunted eyes. She became Sarah's protector and teacher, showing her how things worked in the camp and defending her presence to those who questioned why they should help a white woman. "You are not the first to run from cruelty," Winona told her one evening as they sat by the fire. "Pain has no color. Survival has no tribe. You are welcome here while you heal." As Sarah's body mended, she made herself useful. She helped the women with their work, learning to scrape hides and prepare food. Her hands, once soft and idle, grew strong and capable. The work was hard, but it was honest, and no one hurt her for making mistakes. Instead, they laughed and showed her better ways. It was during her third week in camp that Sarah finally met Chief Lakota. She was carrying water from the stream when she nearly collided with a tall man walking the opposite direction. She looked up, ready to apologize, and found herself staring into the most striking eyes she had ever seen. Lakota was perhaps 30 years old, with broad shoulders and a presence that commanded attention without demanding it. His face was strong and handsome, marked by a thin scar along his jaw. But it was his eyes that caught her, dark and deep, full of intelligence and something else she couldn't quite name. "You are the woman my grandmother has adopted," he said in perfect English, surprising her. "She speaks well of you." "I'm grateful for her kindness," Sarah managed, suddenly self-conscious. "For everyone's kindness." He studied her for a long moment, and Sarah felt exposed, as if he could see all her secrets and scars. But there was no judgment in his gaze, only curiosity and something that might have been recognition. "My grandmother is wise," he said finally. "If she sees worth in you, then it is there. Welcome to our camp, Sarah Matthews." He knew her name. Of course he did. Nothing happened in the camp without the chief knowing. Sarah watched him walk away, disturbed by how her heart had responded to his presence. She had sworn never to trust a man again, yet something about Lakota felt different. Dangerous in an entirely new way. Spring came slowly to the mountains, melting the snow and revealing new grass beneath. Sarah had been with the Lakota for 4 months now, and the camp had become her home in ways she never expected. The people no longer stared at her as a curiosity. The children had stopped being afraid of her pale skin and strange accent. She had become part of the fabric of daily life. Winona had given her a Lakota name, Wanaton, which meant one who charges forward. The old woman said it fit because Sarah had charged into a new life despite her fear. Sarah wore the name with pride, feeling it suited her better than the one Thomas had given her the right to use. Her days fell into comfortable rhythms. She woke with the other women, helped prepare the morning meal, and spent her time learning skills that made her valuable to the community. She had become proficient at tanning hides and was learning beadwork, though her stitches were still clumsy compared to the intricate patterns the other women created. What surprised her most was the laughter. She laughed more in these few months than in all her years with Thomas. The women teased each other while they worked, sharing stories and jokes that sometimes Sarah understood and sometimes she didn't. But the warmth was universal, and she basked in it like a flower turning toward the sun. Lakota was often away, leading hunting parties or meeting with other bands to discuss the increasing pressure from white settlers. But when he was in camp, Sarah found herself watching him. She tried not to, it felt like a betrayal of her vow to remain independent, but he was magnetic in ways she couldn't ignore. He was patient with his people, firm but fair in his decisions. She saw him playing with children, teaching young men to shoot, and listening carefully to the elders' counsel. He was nothing like the men she had known in her old life, who measured their worth by how much they could dominate others. One afternoon, Lakota approached her while she was struggling with a particularly stubborn hide. "You are working too hard," he observed, crouching beside her. "Here, let me show you." His hands covered hers, guiding the scraping tool at a better angle. Sarah's breath caught at the contact. His touch was gentle, respectful, asking permission rather than taking. When was the last time a man had touched her without causing pain? Like this, he said, seemingly unaware of the effect he was having. Feel how the tool wants to move? Work with it, not against it. Under his guidance, the hide began to yield properly. Sarah looked up at him, finding his face close to hers. For a moment, neither moved. Then Dakota released her hands and stepped back, something uncertain flickering across his features. You learn quickly, he said, his voice slightly rough. My grandmother chose well when she brought you into our family. After that, Dakota found more reasons to be near her. He brought her fresh meat from his hunts. He sat by Winona's fire in the evenings when Sarah was there, supposedly to visit his grandmother but always finding ways to include Sarah in the conversation. He taught her more Lakota words and seemed pleased when she used them correctly. The other women noticed and teased Sarah about it. The chief watches you like a wolf watches the moon, one young woman named Kimimela said, giggling. His heart is interested, even if his head tries to be proper. Sarah protested, but her heart wasn't in it. The truth was, she was beginning to feel something she had thought dead inside her. Dakota made her feel seen and valued. He asked her opinions and listened to her answers. He never raised his voice in anger or made her afraid. But fear came anyway, though not from him. It came from her own heart, which was starting to open despite her best efforts to keep it closed. What if she was wrong about him? What if all men eventually showed their true cruelty? What if she let herself care and ended up broken again? One evening, Dakota asked her to walk with him. They climbed to a ridge overlooking the valley, where wildflowers were beginning to bloom. The sunset painted everything in shades of gold and pink. I need to speak honestly with you, Dakota said, his eyes on the horizon. My heart has become involved where perhaps it should not. You have been through much pain. You deserve peace and healing, not the attention of a man. You're not like other men I've known, Sarah said quietly. He turned to face her fully. I would never hurt you, Sarah. This I promise on everything sacred to my people. But I also understand if trust is something you cannot give. I will respect whatever boundary you need. Sarah looked at this man who had given her space to heal, who asked instead of took, who promised protection without demanding submission in return. Her old fears screamed warnings, but something deeper and stronger was whispering different words. I'm afraid, she admitted. But I'm also tired of letting fear decide my life. Dakota smiled then, a genuine expression that transformed his serious face. Then perhaps we can both be brave together. Summer had fully arrived when the rider came. Sarah was gathering berries with the other women, laughing at a story Kimimela was telling, when she heard the commotion from camp. The sound of angry voices carried across the meadow, and instinctively, Sarah knew something was terribly wrong. They hurried back to find the camp in turmoil. A white man sat on horseback in the center of the circle, surrounded by Lakota warriors with weapons drawn. Sarah's blood turned to ice when she recognized him. Thomas Matthews, looking haggard and furious, was demanding they return his property. She's my wife, Thomas shouted, his face red with rage and drink. You savages have no right to keep her here. Give her back, or I'll return with soldiers. Sarah stepped forward before she could stop herself. The women around her tried to hold her back, but she shook them off. This confrontation had been inevitable. Some part of her had known Thomas would never let her go without a fight. I'm not going back, she said, her voice stronger than she felt. You don't owe me anymore, Thomas. His eyes found her in the crowd, and the look of pure hatred there made her want to run. But she stood her ground, surrounded by people who had become her family. She wasn't alone this time. You're my wife, Thomas snarled. The law says you belong to me. These people are harboring stolen property. Dakota stepped between them, his presence commanding immediate attention. He had been meeting with scouts when Thomas arrived, but now he stood tall and unmoved by the white man's threats. She is under my protection, Dakota said in flawless English that clearly surprised Thomas. She came to us seeking safety from your cruelty. We do not recognize laws that treat women as property. You don't get to decide that, Thomas spat. I have rights. The army will back me up. Then bring your army, Dakota replied calmly. But know that threatening my people is unwise. We have treaties. We have rights too. And I do not think your commanders will appreciate you starting a war over one woman who fled your abuse. Thomas's hand moved toward his rifle, but a dozen arrows were instantly trained on him. He froze, finally realizing he was completely outnumbered and outmatched. Sarah saw the calculation in his eyes, the same look he got before he changed tactics during their marriage. "Sarah," he said, his voice suddenly pleading, sickening in its false gentleness. "I've changed. I know I hurt you, and I'm sorry. Come back with me. Give me another chance. Don't choose these savages over your own people." Sarah felt sick. How many times had she heard similar words? How many times had she believed them, only to have him hurt her worse the next time? But she wasn't that desperate, broken woman anymore. "My people are the ones who showed me kindness when I needed it most," she said. "My people are the ones who taught me I had value beyond serving a cruel man. You are not my people anymore, Thomas. You never really were." Something in Thomas's expression shifted from false remorse to genuine rage. "You ungrateful whore," he hissed. "I gave you everything, a home, a name, respectability. And you throw it away to live like an animal with these primitives." "You gave me nothing but pain," Sarah shot back, surprised by her own anger. "Every day with you was survival. Every night was fear. I would rather die free among people who respect me than live one more hour under your control." Thomas jerked his horse's reins, his face twisted with fury. "This isn't over. You hear me? This isn't over. I'll be back with the law, with soldiers, with whatever it takes. You're my wife, and I'm taking you home even if I have to burn this whole camp to do it." Lakota made a sharp gesture, and the warriors moved forward in a coordinated display of force. "Leave now," he commanded. "While you still can. If you return with violence, you will find we are prepared to defend our own." For a moment, Sarah thought Thomas might actually try to fight. But even drunk and enraged, he wasn't quite that stupid. He turned his horse and rode away, but not before fixing Sarah with a look that promised retribution. As the dust from his departure settled, Sarah found she was shaking. Winona came to her side, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "He cannot take you," the old woman said firmly. "We will not allow it." But Sarah knew Thomas. He wouldn't give up. He would see her defiance as the ultimate insult, the one thing he couldn't tolerate. He would come back, and when he did, people she cared about might die because of her. That night, Lakota found her sitting alone by the stream, staring at the water. "You are thinking of leaving," he said. It wasn't a question. "I'm putting everyone in danger," Sarah said. "If I go, maybe he'll leave you alone." "If you go, where will you run?" Lakota asked, sitting beside her. "How many times will you flee before you decide to stand?" "Thomas Matthews is a coward and a bully. Men like him understand only strength. Show him weakness now, and he will never stop hunting you." "But if he brings soldiers?" "Then we will deal with soldiers," Lakota interrupted. "We have dealt with them before. What we will not do is abandon someone under our protection because a cruel man makes threats." The weeks following Thomas's visit were tense. Scouts watched the approaches to camp constantly, and the warriors held extra training sessions. Lakota sent messengers to neighboring bands, building alliances in case Thomas made good on his threat. The entire camp prepared for conflict, and Sarah felt the weight of that preparation crushing her. "This is my fault," she told Winona one evening. "All this trouble because of me." The old woman made a dismissive sound. "Trouble was always coming. White settlers push more each year. Your husband is just one angry man, not the real problem. The real problem is much bigger." Despite the tension, life continued. Lakota insisted Sarah maintain her normal routine, refusing to let Thomas's threats control their lives. He spent more time with her, teaching her to shoot a bow and showing her the best places to find herbs. Their friendship had deepened into something neither of them quite named, though everyone in camp saw it clearly. One afternoon, while they were alone gathering wood, Lakota finally spoke the words that had been building between them. "I love you, Wanaton. I have loved you since you first looked at me with those fierce, frightened eyes and decided to trust anyway." Sarah's heart raced. "I love you too," she admitted. "But I'm still married. In the eyes of the law. The law that treats you as property." Lakota shook his head. "We have our own laws. Our own ceremonies. If you wish it, you could be my wife in truth. Not property, but partner. Equal in all ways." Before Sarah could answer, a scout came running. Riders approaching. Many riders. The camp mobilized instantly. Women and children were moved to a protected area while warriors took defensive positions. Sarah's stomach knotted with dread. This was it. Thomas had returned with force. But when the riders came into view, Sarah was surprised to see they weren't soldiers. They were a mix of white settlers and Lakota from other bands, led by an older white man in a marshal's uniform. Thomas was with them, looking smug and vindicated. The marshal dismounted and addressed Dakota with careful respect. "I'm Marshal Hendricks. I've come regarding Sarah Matthews. Her husband has filed a complaint that she was kidnapped and is being held against her will." "That's a lie," Sarah said, stepping forward. "I ran away to escape his abuse. These people saved my life." The marshal studied her, taking in her Lakota clothing and the confidence in her bearing. "Are you being held here against your will?" "Absolutely not. I stay because I choose to." "She's my wife," Thomas interjected. "She belongs with me." "The law. The law also recognizes a woman's right to seek divorce on grounds of cruelty," the marshal interrupted. "Especially when there's clear evidence of abuse." He gestured to several of the settlers. "These folks came forward with testimony about your behavior, Matthews. Seems you have a reputation." Sarah felt hope flare. She recognized some of the settlers, people from the trading post who had witnessed Thomas's drunken rages and cruel treatment of her. "One woman here says she saw you beat your wife bloody outside the general store," the marshal continued. "Another man testifies you bragged about keeping her in line. Want to dispute these claims?" Thomas's face went purple. "Those are lies. They're siding with savages over their own kind." "They are siding with truth over tyranny," the marshal corrected. He turned to Sarah. "I can escort you back to civilization if you want. Get you proper legal representation for a divorce. Or if you want to stay here, I can document your choice and make sure this man stops harassing these people." Sarah looked at Dakota, whose steady gaze gave her strength. Then she looked at Winona, at Kimamela, at all the faces of people who had shown her what real family meant. Finally, she looked at Thomas, and felt nothing but pity for the small, angry man he truly was. "I'm staying," she said clearly. "I'm filing for divorce, and I'm staying with my real family." Thomas lunged forward, but the marshal and two Lakota warriors stopped him. "You can't do this. You're my wife." "I was never truly your wife," Sarah said. "I was your prisoner. But I'm free now, and I'm never going back." The marshal had Thomas removed from the camp, along with documentation of Sarah's statement and the witnesses' testimonies. The other settlers who had come offered apologies to Dakota for Thomas's behavior, and relationships were mended with promises of fair trade and mutual respect. That night, the camp celebrated with a feast. Dakota took Sarah's hand and led her to the ridge where they had shared their first honest conversation. The stars blazed overhead, countless and bright. "Will you marry me?" he asked. "By our laws, in our way. Will you become my wife not in servitude, but in true partnership?" Sarah thought of the girl she had been, naive and trapped, believing she had no choices. Then she thought of the woman she had become, strong and free, surrounded by love. She thought of everything she had survived to reach this moment. "Yes," she said, and kissed him under the stars. 8,000 times yes. 3 months later, after the divorce was finalized, Sarah and Dakota were married in a traditional Lakota ceremony. She wore white deerskin decorated with intricate beadwork that the women of the camp had created together. Dakota wore his finest clothing, and his eyes never left hers as they made their promises. Winona blessed them, tears streaming down her weathered face. "You charged forward into a new life," she told Sarah. "And you found not just survival, but joy. This is the greatest victory." Sarah had survived cruelty and found love. She had run from captivity and found freedom. She had lost everything and gained a family. As she stood beside Dakota, surrounded by her people, she finally understood what it meant to truly live. And she thrived.